Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I am Auron MacIntyre. There was an explosive incident that came around this weekend. A woman was caught on video throwing racial slurs at a man in a park. Now, normally, this is something that destroys people's lives. We've seen this previously. Just the slightest implication of racism on a video could end up putting your whole life in danger. It would publicly destroy you. And yet, in this case, this woman, Shiloh Hendricks, had a different outcome. She did have all of the pressure you would expect online. She was threatened, all of these things. But ultimately, when she started a fundraiser, instead of seeing her get smacked down or banned, she actually received a lot of money. At this point, over $600,000. And it started to become clear that this incident was not just about what happened to her in that scenario or what she did, but it was a stand in for a race relations situation that has become untenable in the United States. So I want to dive into what happened and why this backlash was predictable, why we should have expected exactly this result eventually, and kind of what it means for the future. But before we do that today, guys, let's hear from our sponsor. This episode of the Auron MacIntyre Show is proudly sponsored by Consumers Research. You've heard about Larry Fink and BlackRock and ESG and all the ways that they're ruining your life, making your groceries more expensive and making your video games more woke. Well, Consumers Research has spent the last 5 years making Larry's life hell, and they're just getting started. Their work and its consequences have been profiled by the Washington Post, New York Times, and most recently, Fox News business reporter Charlie Gasparino wrote a whole chapter in his book, Go Woke, Go Broke, on how effective they've been at dismantling BlackRock's ESG patronage scheme. He's making Larry Fink lose the last bit of hair on his balding head, and you should follow Will's work on X so you can laugh along with him. His handle is at Will Hild, at Will, WILLHILD, on X. All right. So, like I said, this woman, Shiloh Hendricks, she's in Minnesota, I believe, and she was at a park. And while she was at this park, apparently a 5-year-old stole something out of her bag. Now, obviously, that's not good. And you have every right to be angry at a 5-year-old if they steal something, even though it's a child. They're still not allowed to steal from you, and their parent should involve themselves in correcting that situation. Now, Shiloh Hendricks, again, allegedly, I don't believe this part is entirely on the video, but she ended up calling the child who took the item the N word, as we have to call it. We have this ridiculous thing where you can't even use the word in context of condemning it if you don't like it or something like that. You just have to. It's literally a blasphemy law in our society. Like you cannot blaspheme. You cannot utter the sacred word out loud. And so she used that word. Now, to be clear, at the beginning, in case this isn't obvious, you shouldn't do that, right? Like you shouldn't throw around racial slurs. You definitely should not direct them at children. In a moment of anger and frustration, however, that is what happened. Now, I would show you the video, but obviously the language involved would immediately get it taken off of YouTube. So you could just kind of figure out how this goes. But after she allegedly did this, a man is filming her, and he walks up and says, "Oh, did you just say the N word to this child?" And she says, "What are you talking about? It's none of your business." Kind of tries to wave him away. He gets in her face. He continues to film. He continues to, say, "Hey, did you do this? Did you do this? It is my business. Did you do this?" And eventually, she triples down, right? She just kind of drops a hard R several more times in this man's direction before leaving with her child. Now, a couple interesting things about the context here. Apparently, the guy who filmed this is a Somali immigrant who is a alleged pedophile, like is alleged for sexual assault against a minor. And so the first question, the thing you would think people might be more concerned about is what is a man with that kind of record doing hanging out at the park with children? Right? Like that's actually the most concerning thing in this video is the guy filming the video and his presence in an area where he clearly shouldn't be. And yet that's not even part of the controversy. Of course, the most important thing is the words she said. Now, the other interesting thing about that happened in this scenario is, of course, all the doxing and threats and everything you would expect with a viral video of this nature, sadly, in our current society, comes about, right? She gets threatened. I think her social security number gets thrown out there, and she feels like she has to move, and she probably does, right? She probably needs to relocate in order to protect the safety of herself and her child. Now, she goes online and starts this fundraiser, and the fundraiser starts to become something of a rallying cry. All of a sudden, lots of money is pouring into this thing, and eventually, she gets more money in this fundraiser than Carmelo Anthony. Now, for those who are not familiar, I already did an episode or two on this, but Carmelo Anthony is the alleged killer of Austin Metcalf. He allegedly stabbed. I mean, he's kind of admitted that he stabbed him. He said it was in self defense, but we have to throw allegedly in there, I guess. Allegedly stabbed Austin Metcalf and killed him. And famously, in that scenario, Austin Metcalf's father rushed out to forgive uh, Carmelo Anthony. Now, I've spoken a whole show about this in detail. I'm not going to go into all the dynamics involved with Christian forgiveness here. I've already done that somewhere else. So if you want to go watch that video, you can. However, what that did, unfortunately, was embolden Carmelo Anthony. And so rather than be humbled by the forgiveness offered by Austin Metcalf's father, he went out there and said, "Oh no, I'm blameless. I was defending myself. This is all fine." And he started shooting himself as some kind of victim of racial profiling, some kind of racist system, and that's the only reason he's being arrested, anything like that. Not only did he do that, he started raising money. He raised over $500,000 for stabbing a white kid, right? Like that's literally allegedly, in the most reductive way, that is exactly what happened. Not it, and the absurdity is that he like got a nice big house and a new car. Like very clearly, this money is not just going to help some poor downtrodden kid with his legal defense. He's getting rich, so he was rewarded for stabbing a white kid at a track meet, right? And a lot of people saw that. They saw the injustice in that moment, and they wanted a different outcome. I think they wanted to see something different occur. And so the only way they knew how to react to this injustice, I think, was to ultimately fund someone like Shiloh. And so you have this amazing moment where like all these people are like rallying to like have dueling dueling donations. And I say amazing in like the worst way, that both of these people are literally getting rich off this moment. But it's understandable, right? There's a certain level of tit for tat going on here, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. We should have known that things are going to come to this moment, right? Because of the long train of abuses that a lot of people have suffered. So we've seen people get destroyed on the internet for this kind of thing in the past, but it wasn't even close to as egregious as kind of the video that Shiloh had put out there. There was during the Great Awakening and the 2020 and everything else that has been going on. We've had people who obviously we had government sponsored race riots, which is a pretty government condoned race riots are going to mess with your race relations pretty good. People are going to get pretty cynical about your race relations when that's how your government is officially operating. But then we saw also like the double standard where Black Lives Matter and Antifa can burn down cities and protest and tear down statues and destroy everything around them. But if some people walk into the Capitol on January 6th through doors that were open for them, they're going to spend several years in jail, in many cases without proper due process, just because the government wants to screw with them, right? Like that's the actual standard we have in the United States. On top of that, we think about different situations like that one woman who was in a park where a black man was bird watching and her dog was off the leash, and she didn't put it back on the leash when he told her to. And so he started filming her, and he like lured her dog away and said, "I'm going to do whatever I want because you're doing whatever you want." And then she got hysterical She didn't want to be filmed. She was terrified, started screaming, and her whole life got destroyed for this, right? Like she lost her job. I think she lost like her apartment, everything. Same thing with the nurse. I don't know if you remember this incident a few years ago where a nurse was trying to get one of those rental bikes, like you rent them from a station in a city. And she had paid for it and taken the bike. And some black guy walked up and said, "No, I'm taking this bike." The nurse is pregnant at the time, but he just says, "No, I'm taking the bike." And she didn't want to hand it over. She got attacked publicly. She had to get a lawyer who had to go out and like prove that she had purchased the bike and that she wasn't a racist, but she was just trying to keep this guy from stealing her bike. And still, like she had significant damage to her reputation. Had to hire a lawyer, all this stuff to go through all of this. This is the lived reality of a lot of people. We see this over and over again, that even in these minor incidents where, arguably, no racism was involved at all. It's just you can't have a public interaction with, a black person without getting in trouble, right? Like that's basically what it boils down to. If at any time a black person feels uncomfortable with a public, with something that has happened in public, with any kind of relation they've had in public, then you could just lose your life, right? You could get fired, you could lose your bank account, you could lose your marriage, you could have your whole social situation destroyed, you can become completely unemployable because someone of the wrong race, of a privileged race, said they didn't like the way that you interacted with them and they put it online, right? Like that's a real thing that happens in the United States. And when you give someone that kind of power, they're eventually going to abuse it. Most black people probably aren't doing this, but when you have the opportunity to do it at any given time, there are going to be people who exploit it and abuse it, which is why you don't hand this privilege to people. It's absolutely destructive. And so we've seen these tensions building over a long time. And I think for a lot of people, the whole Austin Metcalf thing was a real wake up call, right? Like this was kind of the line, because if someone is going to get rewarded, like they like actually make a large amount of money off of stabbing a kid, then you have a serious problem. Like your society has an insane problem that has to get fixed right away, or things get really bad, right? Like very, very bad. If you are basically paying a certain percentage of the population if they stab someone, like obviously this is going to get very bad very quickly. So you need some kind of formal response. And unfortunately, the government is not going to kind of, at least at this moment, change the way that we kind of experience this problem. And so that means that the average person needs to find some way to work through this scenario. And so even though Shiloh Hendricks is, I'm sure, far from any kind of ideal candidate to rally behind, obviously this is not the person you would choose in generally, right? This is not some upstanding citizen probably, but ultimately her moment represents something much larger. And it was very clear that a lot of people had they did not understand the dynamics at play. We had a lot of conservatives or very responsible rational centrists run out and lecture everybody who was donating to Shiloh Hendricks. They're all the woke right. They're all just identitarians, just like the left. Why can't we just ignore race? Why can't we just ignore all these things? Yeah, there's a lot of that refrain. A lot of the loserdom, suspects were kind of added again. However, they were not factoring in just kind of basic game theory, like just basic human interactions and how they play out in any given space, which is funny because a lot of these guys pride themselves quite a bit on being like super advanced professors or sociologists or, whatever. And so you think that they would just play out these basic interactions. But of course, their real religion is anti-racism. And it's particularly funny for like the rational centrists because they spend a lot of time attacking anti-racism as an ideology. But to be clear, like ultimately it's what they believe. It is their core religion. They just didn't like the way it was being applied under the radical progressive left. But they still hold pretty much the same belief system. And so when they look at an interaction like this, they can't even look at it like rationally, objectively. Like, okay, here's why we got this. Here's how this played out. And of course, we were going to get there. They can't even apply that level of intellectual rigor. Instead, It's a lot of, oh, well, just don't be a racist. Just try not to be a racist, as if that's the core problem here, that like white people are just too racist, and that's why this occurred. They're missing the forest for the trees, because ultimately they're still, their core ideology is still gay race communism, just kind of down 10%, right? Like the last patch of it, the one that they liked when they were in charge, right? So I want to dive a little bit into the game theory behind this, explain why we were inevitably going to get this, and kind of talk about some of the other incidents that have set the table for arriving at this moment. But before I do, let's talk about Blaze TV. Hey guys, if you've been watching this show for a while, then you know that around here we encourage something that conservatives usually don't do, winning. That's why it was so great to see Donald Trump's electoral victory, along with the cultural and political momentum that the right just hasn't had in a very long time. But we also know that the fight is far from over, and at some point the left will start pushing for censorship again. If you like what I'm doing here and you want to keep it going, then head over to Blaze TV. They have the behind the scenes content, exclusives, and documentaries that you're just not going to see anywhere else. And it starts at just $8 a month, basically the price of a fancy coffee, when you use the promo code Auron at checkout. That's only 26 cents a day to stand with a platform that stands with you. So go to blazetv.com/Auron and subscribe today. That's blazetv.com/Auron. The promo code is AURON, and you'll save $20 right now off the annual plan. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about game theory. Game theory is just a realm of mathematics that kind of talks about how humans interact, socially in games, iterations of games, what choices are available to them, and how that allows you to kind of predict actions in any given scenario. We've talked about this before in other places, but it's just a very useful framework, and it really explains what happened here. And so I want to dive into this for just a second. So you have this moment, right, in any strategy where you are going to either cooperate or defect, right? Does it make more sense for me to work with someone, or does it make more sense for me to betray this agreement and secure my own advantage, right? And in any given game, or across any given set of games, the strategies are, we can both cooperate, or we can both defect, or I can defect and you can cooperate. These are basically your options. And so you have this moment where if you are cooperating and the other person is cooperating, then obviously you're working just fine. But if one person is cooperating and the other person defects, then you have to make a decision. Do I impose a cost on this person, or do I allow them to continue to defect? Because if there is no cost to this person, then they will recognize that they can defect without cost whenever they wish, and they will choose to defect whenever it benefits them over time, right? So the most common strategy, the strategy that you deploy in order to stop this, is tit for tat. So I cooperate, you cooperate, we're good, we're good. I cooperate, you defect. You pay a cost, I will defect too. Now we can either both go back to cooperation, or we can, completely split. But the only way I'm going to ever stop you from defecting is to have a cost, to impose a cost on you. Allowing you to continue over and over again to defect is just terrible strategy. It's going to lose every time. So really the only viable strategy to create a equilibrium in the system, to get the system back to cooperate, is to provide this negative feedback, right? If you have a positive feedback for defecting, if you are rewarded for defecting, then you will continue to do so, and the defections will accelerate, right? They'll become more frequent and they'll become more severe because you are obtaining an advantage without any kind of cost. So without that negative feedback to bring the system back to homeostasis, to put it back in cooperate, if you don't do that, then it will continue to spiral out of control. And so that's it's not super complicated. Anyone who's ever been in any social situation recognizes this, right? If you let someone cheat at a game once, then if you let a kid cheat at a board game and you allow them to cheat whenever they want, they don't end up liking or respecting you. They end up cheating all the time and learning a terrible lesson. If you're on a playground as a kid and one kid, decides to break the rules of the game and, shove someone to the ground, well, you either shove them to the ground or they're going to continue to do that. Like either they pay a reciprocal cost for their violation of the rules or they're going to get out of control, right? Like everyone knows this inherently. This is every one of our interactions is like this. So this is just tit for tat at scale, right? So what we've had for a very long time is a system where one side can defect and the other side cannot defect because if they do, their lives will be ruined. So you had one side, uh, you have white America, who, if they are racist, their entire lives are destroyed. Right? If a white person is publicly racist, that's going to destroy their lives. It's going to destroy their career. It's going to destroy everything that they care about. It is literally like the eternal sin that will follow you for the rest of your life. That's how white America is treated when it comes to racist acts. But if black America is racist, there is no cost. In fact, in many cases, there is an advantage. You can be publicly racist as a black politician. You can insult white America. You can attack white America. Ilhan Omar literally just, I think yesterday, was talking about how white men are the most dangerous thing in the United States and they have to be controlled by the government, right? Like, and she's rewarded for that kind of racism. She's not going to lose her seat in Congress. She's not going to lose her husband, even though she had to divorce her brother, of course. But she is married to a white man. But of course she is. That's how Black America is rewarded when they involve themselves in racism. Guys like Carmelo Anthony are obviously making $500,000 off of stabbing someone of the opposite race. As where obviously, if it was the other direction, Austin Metcalf would have received not a bit of mercy from anyone, probably, sadly, including his father. And so ultimately, we recognize this double standard, right? We live in a society with this massive double standard. And without some kind of tit for tat, without some kind of pushback, this is just going to continue. It's just going to accelerate. And so I think what we saw here, whether you like that Shiloh Hendricks was the focus of this effort or not, was a actual just complete disgust reaction, right? We got to this point where everyone has had to live under this asymmetry for a very long time, and they are just tired of it. And watching Carmelo Anthony profit from the murder of Austin Metcalf, alleged murder of Austin Metcalf, I think broke the straw for a lot of people. Watching this kid who was given this incredible deference by the father of the boy that he allegedly murdered. And the fact that not only did not only was he not touched by that, he actually drove that man out of the press conference where he was going to play himself as the victim and then raised a small fortune off of it. Like that's a bridge too far. Like once people are literally becoming half millionaires by murdering young white men, like there's not a lot of places to go. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the last of the line. So people said, okay, we have to do something. Now, again, was this the best thing to do? Probably not, but that's the form the zeitgeist took because people were fed up. And in a way, the fact that the candidate chosen for this kind of charity push, the fact that she was not the perfect person, that she was not vetted for this, that she was not chosen like some kind of Rosa Parks as an exemplar to take this action, kind of says something there too, right? That people were willing, they did not care if she was an imperfect representative because they felt a level of frustration so significant that it didn't matter. It was still a message that had to be sent, right? And ultimately, I think that's why we saw this massive push. Now, this was on Give, Send, Go, because many of the other money raising, fundraising ones wouldn't let a campaign like this on their platform. The interesting thing is that while Give, Send, Go did not remove Shiloh Hendricks's donation drive, they did censor the comments in a way that they did not for Carmelo Anthony. Now, both of the comments sections were pretty vile or funny, depending on how you look at it. But but both of the comment sections were full of really nasty stuff, right? Both sides having exactly what you'd expect. A lot of anti-black racism on Shiloh's and a lot of anti-white racism on Carmelo's, right? So the comments were equally gross. But despite Gibson Go not censoring in the way of removing the fundraiser, they did shut down the comments on Shiloh's, and I believe they are still up on Carmelo's. I haven't checked recently, but the last time I checked, they were up on his, but not on hers. So again, we can see that even when something like this happens, even with a company that's very dedicated to kind of leaving these things open no matter what, like free speech absolutists, we still see some of these problems, right? All right. So some other things that I think have set the tenor of this conversation, and why we arrived here. So when I was a teacher, one of the schools I taught at was a Title One public school, which means the kids there are very poor. Their families can't afford the supplies, and so they get extra money from the government to make sure that those children still receive what they need to go to school and whatnot. And when I was there was it was a majority minority school. So most of the students were either Hispanic or Black, and a large Haitian population in the area. There's a high concentration, very, very small percentage of white students at that school. Everybody else would be classified as a minority, even though they're in the majority in that school. And the dynamic in that school was very bad when it came to race relations, because all of the teachers in the school, and the principals, everybody involved, knew that the school had an eye on it because of its high minority population, and the fact that the discipline was very bad, the test scores were very bad, and so there you have this moment where like they know the school is not running well, but they have to be careful because any changes they might try to do, like cracking down on discipline or failing, students who aren't performing well, those will be seen as racist, and everybody knows this, right? The administrators literally tell you as you come in, by the way, like we can't suspend these kids because if we get too many suspensions, we jack up the number for the entire district because we have all the minority kids in our school, right? So we can't suspend them even if they deserve it, because it will make us look bad because we're suspending too many students of color. We can't fail them because if we fail too many of them, then we're failing all the students of color. And so everyone knows the problems, but they also know that the solutions will be unpopular. And so you kind of know that going in. But it gets much worse than that. That just kind of like sets the frame for the school, because these students know that they have a certain amount of privilege because of their race. They go around saying a lot of awful stuff. So I was in several classrooms, where some of the Black students would openly and loudly talk about how smelly and ugly and disgusting they found white people to be. Right? They would say this out loud without hesitation. And when they were reported for it, nothing happened. Like just absolutely nothing happened to these kids. They never got in trouble, right? It was never a problem. They maybe got a mild talking to by some kind of administrator, and then they got shipped right back into the classroom. And so because they were able to do this on a regular basis, they had no fear of talking about white people in this manner. And this is something that is going to wear on people because, of course, the white students could not respond in kind. The white students couldn't say about the Black students what the Black students were saying about the white students, because if they did, their lives would be destroyed. Like, obviously, they would get in trouble at school, of course. But what if they got caught on a cell phone video? All of a sudden, they would be completely, destroyed. Their lives would be destroyed publicly. And of course, it was the power imbalance was so crazy that at one point the Black students took to screaming white power in the hallway. One, because they knew it was transgressive and they wouldn't get in trouble for it. And because the teachers didn't know what to do, right? They didn't know what to do about the fact that these guys were yelling something like that. but also because they could mock the white students with it because they knew the white students couldn't do anything. The white students couldn't say something like that. The white students couldn't speak out in opposition when the black students were making fun of their race. But the black students could literally yell white power and not get in trouble. And so that was the racial dynamic in this school. You can imagine that it doesn't take very long before you recognize how untenable this is. And this obviously plays out in much more serious ways in the real world. So we all know the recent example of Daniel Penny, right? A guy who is trying to protect people on the subway from a guy who's screaming out loud. Now, once again, this man who was mentally ill, this black man who's mentally ill, he and basically the entire left and a good chunk of America expects him to be able to continue to do whatever he wants. He's allowed to scream. He's allowed to threaten people on the subway. It doesn't matter because he's black. And because he's black, no one can stop him. He has a special ability to say that out loud. And because if someone like Daniel Penny tries to stop him, then he's going to have his life destroyed. Daniel Penny luckily was found innocent. However, the approach was to destroy this man. Right, the state of New York intended to destroy his life. The White House hated him. Excuse me. The entire liberal media was out to destroy his life. So just because he defended himself and others in a car when the guy he was trying to defend himself in a subway car, when the guy he was trying to defend himself was of the wrong color, like his entire life was going to be destroyed. And that's again how everyone lives in the United States. This is the racial dynamic that we have fostered. I'm also reminded of when there was the young man or the young kid Austin Hennett, or no, sorry, I'm mixing him up with Austin Metcalf. Cannon Hennett. Cannon Hennett was like a 5-year-old. He was riding around on a bike, and when this was a few years ago, and at some point, a man shot him in the face. A black man just shot him directly in the face. And when the police came, when he was apprehended, his defense for himself was, well, this kid, this 5-year-old, called me the N-word, right? Called me the N-word. And so therefore, I was justified in blowing him away. Now, we have no way to know whether or not Cannon Hennett called this guy the N-word. However, the first thing that this boy's mother felt she had to do was run out and tell everybody that her son was not racist. Like, that was the most important thing that she could do, is run out and tell everyone who would listen that her son did not say the N-word. He was not a racist. It was not about her son being murdered. It was not about the horrible injustice that was done to her and her son. And to be clear, I don't think you should have ethnic hatred in your heart. But if there is one excuse to have it, it would be when someone murders your child in cold blood. Your 5-year-old blows them away. And yet, her first response was, no, 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 just whatever you do, don't think that my child was a racist. And you have to expect that a large part of that is ultimately because she doesn't want to be seen as a racist. She has to live on, and she doesn't want everyone assuming that she had this racist kid that got blown away. Not focusing on the fact that the murder is the most horrific thing, that nothing a 5-year-old can say should get them murdered by somebody without any impulse control. But in our society, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is, did you commit blasphemy? Did you say the sacred word? Did you say the unspeakable name? That's the most important thing. And when, again, you have a society structured this way, things are going to get bad. Like, things are going to get out of control. You're going to get guys who make $500,000 because they stabbed a white kid. Like, that's going to be the world you live in when one set of people plays by these rules and everybody else has to play by a different set of rules. You simply cannot allow that. You cannot allow them to defect while you cooperate endlessly. Like, that is a fool's errand. Okay. So, is it surprising that we got to this point? Absolutely not. Is Shiloh Hendricks the best candidate to put forward for this? Is she the person ideally that one would have rallied behind? Is this the act ultimately that you wanted to see this happen and the support flow? No, probably not. But guess what? Something was coming down the pipeline. Okay. Like the stage was set for something like this, and you cannot be surprised when it happens. Donald Trump's not the best presidential candidate. He's not the guy I would have chosen to push back against the total state, the system as it is. Some people will argue, oh, he's not doing enough. He's a stooge or whatever. Fine, whatever. You see my point here. Donald Trump is not the guy you would have probably chosen as like the best person to push this ideology forward, or the best person to fight this battle against ideology is probably a better way to put it. But ultimately, he is who the zeitgeist chose, right? Like he was the guy who actually got it done. Not the clean cut guys, not the Mitt Romneys, not the guys who've been playing politics in the party for decades like Ted Cruz. It was Donald Trump who got it done at the end of the day. And sometimes that's just how life works, right? You don't always go to war with the army you want, you go to war with the army you have. And in this moment, the battle of Shiloh erupted. And I think we need to understand kind of the last thing here before I go to the questions of the people, that ultimately what we're seeing is a big shift. A big shift. I think this is a huge shift in where we've been. Because again, previously, this woman's life would have just been destroyed. She would, again, she's far less defensible than several of the other women who have had their lives destroyed in this manner. And so it just a few years ago, if this incident had occurred, she would have been completely destroyed publicly. However, what we've seen is that even though you're still not going to have mainstream figures coming out and defending this woman for the most part, you did see that the public was willing to stand up and say, I'm going to make this symbolic act to show that this is not as bad as stabbing a young man in cold blood. Like, actually, this woman, even if she did something wrong, is more deserving of help than a guy who stabbed a young man at a track meet. And I need to make it clear that that's the case. And so in this moment, you get this rallying, and it's because people are done with this racial blasphemy law. They're done with it. That doesn't mean you should run around throwing, racial slurs at people hatefully, but people are done having this double standard where if a black student literally stabs another kid, he can get rich. But if a white person says something that's mildly construed as racist, their lives are destroyed. Like this cannot continue. We cannot continue to live like this. You cannot have an entire state religion centered around the holiness of some dependent minority class of a political party. Like the Democrats cannot make black people holy in a way that everyone else has to like walk around and make sure they never offend them and allow all kinds of absurd stuff to occur because they've decided that the double standard is the key, right? Like you cannot live that way. And people are tired of it. People are tired of these blasphemy laws. It's funny because the very people, again, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of the guys who are the rational centrists, the guys who throw around terms like woke right, they really jumped on this, right? Like they were very angry that someone like Shiloh Hendricks would receive any kind of support, any kind of defense in this scenario. And it's great because these are the very people who get super angry that like there are some Christian nationalists out there who say that like there's nothing wrong with blasphemy laws and we had them on the books in the United States well after the First Amendment was written, like that's actually part of the American tradition. They get very, very, very angry when someone says something like that, even though it's just historically accurate. But they are all for blasphemy laws when it comes to race relations. Like they are 100% behind blasphemy laws. But of course, they are only behind one side of blasphemy laws. Because check this out, right? I can say white trash on YouTube right now, and I'm not going to get censored. This video is going to be up tomorrow. It's going to be monetized. It'll be fine. I could say cracker on this YouTube video, and no one's going to care, right? No one's going to care. The chuds, right? All these racial slurs for white people, you can say them all the time. And no, YouTube's never taking the video down. They're never censoring you. They're never demonetizing you. But I literally cannot say the word she said, even now, like even with the platform I have, because if I did, that would destroy everything, right? There's, like, YouTube would take down the channel, they'd take down the video, they'd censor everything. That is a blasphemy law. If that is the very definition of a blasphemy law. And not only is it blasphemy, it's blasphemy protecting only one racial group. There's one racial, or I should say, really only one group can't be protected from those blasphemy laws. And so we have the scenario that is just completely untenable, completely unbalanced, and people are done with it. Again, a few years ago, most people still would have gone along with the narrative that, some nurse trying to keep a black man from stealing her bike is a racist. They would have gone along with the narrative that a woman getting harassed in a park, she's a huge racist. They would even have gone along with maybe the narrative that a guy like Kyle Rittenhouse, right, is a racist because he tried to defend himself at a Black Lives Matter rally. But today, they're donating to Shiloh Hendricks. Again, maybe not the most worthy recipient of that support, but you understand how we got here. How we got here is actually incredibly obvious. And just game theory wise, just tactically, it makes perfect sense. Like, you can't sit and watch someone defect for, decades and decades worth of games and then not have some kind of cost. Like, we've seen what happens. It's accelerating. It's accelerationism at its finest. One side is allowed to go out and literally murder someone and make $500,000 off it, like some kind of hitman, like a well-paid hitman. And the other side just has to shut up and take it, right? Like that could not have gone on forever. And people put up with it for way too long. But the time has come to end this, right? It's done. That doesn't mean that I think everyone should go around responding the way that Shiloh Hendricks did. I don't think you should. However, if someone does, we should be able to recognize that that is actually not a criminal act. It's not worse than murder, right? Your 5-year-old getting murdered is worse than him saying the N-word if he even did that, right? Like, we should be able to understand that as a society. We have to get back to a place where we grasp that as a society. And if we don't, if we leave race relations where they are right now, it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get more horrific. So is this the ideal situation? No, absolutely not. But something had to be done. And this is what got done. And so I think more and more people are realizing that if you don't address this issue, if you don't get to the core of this issue, then you are going to have a really serious problem. It's only going to get much, much worse. And so that's why we ended up in this scenario. And I think unless we see significant effort in the culture to change this, we're only going to get more like this, because ultimately, like I said, the moment has shifted. The vibe has shifted, as they say. And I don't think people are going to take a Daniel Penny or a Shiloh Hendricks moment the same again. I think you are going to see those pushbacks more and more often. And because there has to be some kind of cost. If there isn't, it's only going to get more out of control. All right, guys, let's go to the questions of the people here real quick. Creeper Weirdo said, "Why is this happening? 2020, that's why." Yeah, I mean, it's 2020 is certainly a huge factor. Again, we literally had Kamala Harris bailing criminals out for their race riots. Like, we had functionally government sponsored race riots. That's going to put you in a position like this. People who are told that they have to be in this tolerant, multicultural, colorblind society, and then they watch stuff like that happen, they're going to recognize that they have been sold a bill of goods, right? Now, maybe the solution is to bring it more in line with the society as described. Unfortunately, I don't see that happening, but a lot of people think that. But the one thing you can't do is stand still. The one thing you can't do is leave things as they are, because people are making $500,000 for stabbing high school students. Like, that's not okay. You have to stop that somehow. This wouldn't be the way I chose to stop it, but somebody had to stand up and do something, and that's what people decided to do. Philosophical Thirstworm says tit for tat retaliation is how Latinos save themselves from the black violence that Asians suffered. You can't reach detente without reciprocation. Yeah, I think unfortunately that's a correct assessment, right? When you have when you have one community that is willing to do violence to another community, if you are not willing to reciprocate, if you do not have a way to defend yourself or to have the law defend you, and they're allowed to continue, then they will continue to escalate. And in many ways, I think you're right. That's why you do see increased violence against Asians by the black community, because it's just a community that is not prepared to defend itself the same way. Though the rooftop Koreans, they've made their statement. Dash or blank, I guess we'll say here. The left and black behavior has revived racism. Yeah, I mean, again, you just can't allow one-sided racism, right? Like, again, most black people are probably not going to be horribly openly racist, but many of them can be, and they'll be rewarded for it. Again, you can achieve political power. You can become a celebrated scholar. You can become a celebrated artist in Hollywood, a celebrated rap star, because you're really racist, right? Like, and that's just not true on the other side. Like, there's not a bunch of white guys making a ton of money putting out super racist music or making entire movies about how they're going to kill their way through the black population, like you see all these black revenge movies like Django Unchained and such. Like, you don't see that the other way. And you can't expect one group to do this forever and then another group not to respond in kind. Eventually the hammer does come and drop. Mel Gibson after 4 beers. That's a great name. Feels like the start of a lot of winning for us. It's okay to be white, erase white guilt. Also, based sunbather poster back there. Again, I do think that this is a vibe shift. I do think that this means something. Something is happening, as they say. And obviously, there's still a lot that could unfold. The problem with tit for tat is, of course, the tat can get out of control. And that's what all the rational centrists run around warning, right? Oh, no, here's the right-wing backlash we've been warning about. Here's the right-wing backlash. And it's like, yeah, guys, I get it. But if you had fixed that original behavior, you wouldn't have this problem. There's a backlash for a reason. Tim Miller says, this occurred because whites aren't racist enough. Again, I think that the problem here is ultimately basically a religion that has been centered around black identity. The current story about America is we become a more perfect union by like elevating blacks and other minorities. And so the Civil War is about blackness, and the civil rights movement. Like, these are our finest moments. This is what the country is about. And when you create laws around protecting people from mean words, I mean, Shiloh Hendrix was investigated by the state of Minnesota. She didn't hit anybody. She didn't throw anything. She was stolen from. Right? She is ultimately the victim of a crime, though ultimately it's a 5-year-old. So 5-year-olds do things they're not supposed to do. It's not quite as serious, obviously, but still, like, the fact is that she committed no crime, and yet she's being investigated for a crime by the state of Minnesota. By the way, reminder: pedophile filming the video at a children's park. But what we're talking about is this woman said mean words. Now, should she have said those words? Yeah, probably not. But you know what? That's not a crime. Like, what are we doing here, right? This is absolutely insane. Let's see here. Bomini Igloo says the word will continue until morale improves. Philosophical Thirstworm again says, I can't even tell you a great story because the YouTube block on anything mentioning astronauts and scholars is too restrictive. Let's see. Jacob says, you are the rizziest of the crackers, Auron. Thanks, I guess. Sorry, I don't know that particular lingo. Hans Juker says, get to the gym, get a gun. Always generally good advice in pretty much any situation. Jacob Zindel says, many of the comments here are wild. Uh, Auron, how do you keep message discipline so well while maintaining a frame of truth? Thanks for saying that. And I just try to do my best. That these are difficult topics. It's very easy for people to get very passionate and maybe say things that are uh, not couth. Obviously, that's kind of what happened with Shiloh here. But at the same time, there are real problems, right? Like she shouldn't have been stolen from. She shouldn't have been harassed. And ultimately, a lot of people see this scenario as indicative of other scenarios they've had in their own life. Pretty much everyone's had an experience where they had to endure inappropriate behavior from a minority because ultimately they knew that asking that person to stop was going to get them in serious trouble. Like, what if it goes on? What if they ask that person to stop, even if they do it in a very reasonable way, and it's construed as racist, and they get destroyed online? Literally, a pregnant nurse had her life wrecked because a black man stole the bike from her. Like, provably, he was in the wrong. He was committing a theft, and yet she had her life destroyed because of that. When you have that dynamic, again, you just can't stand. Like, I don't care how reasonable or how respectable you're trying to be. If you're so reasonable and respectable that you're willing to basically get killed, like, you're just a cuck, right? Like that's what's happening. Is like you're just a doormat, and you're going to get destroyed, and you deserve to be destroyed. So we have to find a way to talk about this problem in a reasonable manner. But we have to talk about it. Like, you have to talk about it. We can't ignore this anymore. Because if you do ignore it, more stuff like this will happen, right? The whole reason we are here now is we ignored this for too long. The whole reason we're here now is we didn't talk about this because it was too dangerous. It was too scary. The social stigma was too high. We can't do that anymore. People are literally getting killed, and the murders are making money off of it. You can't do that. You can't allow it. There's just, it's not an option. Templar says, at the heart is whether we are seeking to support our worst when the left always does. At the heart, whether we are seeking to support our worst when the left always does. Okay, so I guess you're saying the left always supports their worst, right? Like, they always support George Floyd's, guys who are obviously garbage, like this gang member wife beater who got deported to El Salvador because he's El Salvadoran. Like, they're trying to defend him. You're right that ultimately the left always defends their worst. And I don't want to say that I always want the right to defend their worst. That's not the way that I would frame it. But I would say that I want the right to have an awareness of the dynamic involved, right? I don't know if you immediately support the worst of the people who might be on your side. In fact, I've got a feeling that ultimately Shiloh Hendrix might not be on your side, right? Like, I'm just guessing, but given the sleeve tattoos and everything else, I don't know. I don't know if Shiloh Hendrix has been a Trump supporter her whole life. But we do have to think about how we're responding. And so when you see someone like her getting supported, the thing you definitely don't go do is run out and be like, oh, this is just the right being as bad as the left. It's not, actually. And this backlash was entirely predictable, and you should have seen it coming. And if you were willing to say more dangerous but true things earlier on, you wouldn't end up in this scenario in the first place. Let's see. No Guard says Christian forgiveness is how you move from tit for tat to mutual cooperation. It requires that you go first. You go for tit for tat. Well, Christian forgiveness is that that the person has to seek forgiveness, right? That and again, I did the entire episode on that previously, so I'm not going to do a whole spiel on it. But basically, the problem with Austin Metcalf's father and the way that he did forgiveness is he ignored that Carmelo Anthony had not asked for forgiveness, which is critical to the process of restoration. And obviously, when you then see him turn around and throw the father out of the press conference he was doing to raise money and make himself a victim, it just becomes very clear that your tit for tat has fallen apart, right? You will not be moving people back to mutual cooperation in this manner. People saw that it just didn't work, and I think that's again why you saw the response we saw this time. Enrico Palazzo says in multiracial societies, you don't vote in accordance with your economic interests or your social interests. You vote in accordance to race and religion. Yes, that was of course said by Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore, famously. It's a example of a multiracial society that does work, but it works because it's authoritarian, right? That's how Singapore makes that dynamic work, and that's why Lee Kuan Yew was talking about that aspect of democracy, because ultimately, the way to make that multiracial society work for Singapore is to cane anybody who spits gum on the sidewalk and kill anybody who smokes marijuana. It's harsh, but it does work. Um, Tim Miller says, "Why is it assumed that Shiloh is white trash?" I would guess it's mainly the tattoos, and kind of the way that the response was given. Let's just say, you can be classy and racist. I guess like there are obviously rich people who can display racism, but they usually do it in a more of a elegant, backhanded manner. As where Shiloh was very upfront. So I think that's probably where the assumption comes from. But again, the fact that we can even use the word white trash when she can't use the word she used kind of wraps the whole thing up in a nutshell, right? Let's see. Michael Robertson says lots of people are very emotional at the moment. In these times, it's important to take a step back and remember who is truly oppressed. Gamers. Yes, that's very true. She did use what is called the gamer word. And so she is an honorary gamer, I suppose. Her Xbox Live game would have been very impressive. Let's see here. Michael Robertson says, oh, sorry, I already got that one. Watt says, why does a foreigner feel comfortable harassing an American woman, even outside of the race angle? Yes, again, very important. Uh, it's amazing how much of the story is a problem and has nothing to do with Shiloh Hendricks. Obviously, problem there as well, but so much of this story from the fact that a foreigner felt like he was entitled to intimidate this woman who's an American citizen. The fact that the guy was allegedly a pedophile at this park. There's a lot wrong with the story that is just not being touched on because everyone's more worried about the blasphemy, right? Everyone's more worried about the sacred word being spoken. And ultimately, I think that's what's happening here. There's an account on Twitter called Dissident Soaps. He sells some pretty good soap. But on top of that, he made this point, which I think was pretty interesting. Sorry. Goodness. But he made this point that I think is very important. Ultimately, that this is the left's ultimate shibboleth. Like, this is their ultimate rallying cry. And so another reason that I think a lot of people pushed on this so hard is because this is in this moment of kind of conservatives having momentum and the left being in retreat. They're also testing whether this particular most sacred of taboos enforced by the left is still valid, right? And I think that's a big part of the dynamic that was playing out here. We have friend Lee who says, accurate as usual, Auron. I've been making these exact arguments on X. To me, it's plainly obvious why this happened. It's hard for me to understand how so many people aren't getting this. Right. And again, you don't have to support her exact behavior here to understand why this occurred and why she ended up getting the donations that she got. And if you're interested in not having more of these incidents, then you need to be more honest about the racial dynamics involved, not less, right? If you want to see, if you don't want to see warring factions raising money for bad behavior in an attempt to like basically have, it's basically financial gang violence, right? Like it's like the Greens and the Blues in the Hippodrome in ancient Byzantium. Like they are fighting each other for control of this thing, right? Like this is a show of strength. This is a marshaling of the forces in a digital sense. And the reason you're seeing this again is because the racial dynamic at play is so obviously tilted one direction that people feel compelled to get involved in something that they probably ultimately wouldn't do themselves most of the time. And so I think if you want to see any of this actually get addressed, you need to be able to talk about this dynamic. And the rational centrists running around and saying, oh, well, this is just the same thing. It's the same thing as Carmelo Anthony getting money for stabbing Austin Metcalf. No, it's not. It's actually not even close, which doesn't mean it's great. but it's not the same thing. And when you pretend it's the same thing and you don't address the underlying problem, like the fact that Ilhan Omar can get on television and talk about how terrible white men are and have zero problem, have zero pay zero price with her career, her public position, anything like that. Unless you're willing to address that problem, then don't talk to me about this problem. Like unless you are very seriously working to fix that problem, don't tell me this is a problem because you didn't care. Like you don't care. You only want to keep the status quo, and that is the real problem. Because if you keep the status quo, things are only going to get worse. It's only going to get more destructive, and we simply cannot. We cannot survive this way. We cannot survive this way as a country. We cannot survive this way as a people. It's just not an option. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for hanging with me. Got a little bit of a cold, little bit of frog in the throat today. But if this is your first time on YouTube watching, please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, click the bell notification, all that stuff, so you know when we're going live. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. If you would like to support the show, you can head over to Blaze TV, or rather, you can head to Blaze TV and subscribe, but you can also head to shopblazemedia.com and pick up some merch. Like today, I'm wearing the Brutal Americans hoodie from the store. So if you like to pick up one for yourself, you can head over to shopblazemedia.com. And the last few hardbacks of the Total State are selling out. The next printing is going to be a paper one. There's going to be a paper second edition. So they're clearancing out the last few Total State hardcovers. So if you have been holding out, you want to get a hardcover, they're now both very affordable, and it's the last chance you're going to have to get them because it'll be a paperback book from here on out. So if you want to do that, you can pick it up at Amazon or grab one at your local bookstore. All right, guys, thank you everybody for watching, and as always, I will talk to you next time.